Great. All right, so we may as well get started and see how far we go tonight. We're now starting the second part of the Kitáb-i-Íqán. You will recall that this was written for the uncle of the Bab, who was totally confused about what happened to the Bab, why he was executed, and why the other brother of this uncle, the other uncle of the Bab, was also executed for being a Babi. And so he has traveled to Baghdad to meet with Baha'u'llah to ask him some questions. And the response to those questions is this amazing book of certitude, which was revealed over a period of about 48 hours, which is absolutely amazing. We have now finished the first part. The second part, as I said last week, is twice as long as the first part. The first part actually was interesting to me because it was Baha'u'llah giving us the keys to unlock scripture, because he defined a lot of terms. And he's going to continue doing that to some degree in this section we're going to hopefully get through this evening. But it's very dense reading, and I also have excluded a few paragraphs and sort of transitional paragraphs, as well as one that talks about Hamza and another something that you would have to know more about Islam to be interested in. And of course, we have to remember that this is written to a very devoted Muslim. So he uses many quotes from the Quran. He also uses some quotes from the Old and New Testaments. So now we are going to get started on the second part, which amazingly, because it's really one big work that he wrote so quickly, revealed so quickly, also starts with the preamble. So Imam, can you read the preamble, please?
Yes. Verily he who is the daystar of truth and the revealer of the Supreme Being holdeth for all time indisputed sovereignty over all that is in heaven and on earth, though no man be found on earth to obey him. He verily is independent of all earthly domain, though he be utterly destitute. Thus we reveal unto thee the mysteries of the cause of God, and bestow upon thee the gems of divine wisdom, that haply thou mayest soar on the wings of renunciation to those heights that are veiled from the eyes of men.
Baha'u'llah's primary goal in writing this to the uncle of the Bab is to help him to be able to know and accept a manifestation of God when he encounters one, even if it's his nephew. And so what he's going to now do is go into a discussion about the nature, the essence of these manifestations of God. And in this preamble, he begins in this first sentence, he who is the day star of truth and revealer of the Supreme Being. So this could be any manifestation of God, day star of truth, revealer of the Supreme Being. So this is what Baha'u'llah, the Bab, Jesus, what they are. They are revealers of the Supreme Being. And then he says, any one of these, he who is, holdeth for all time, not just during their time, but forever, undisputed sovereignty over all that is in heaven and on earth, though no man be found on earth to obey him. So it doesn't matter whether they have any followers or at all, because they are the revealer of God and the day star of truth, they still have undisputed sovereignty. And he's going to, in a few pages, start into a discussion of what is meant by sovereignty over all in heaven and earth, even if they don't have any followers. He's independent of all earthly dominion, even if he's utterly destitute. So he is going to reveal these divine mysteries so that we can soar on the wings of renunciation to the heights that are veiled from the eyes of men. All right, so Sarush, can I get you to read the next couple of slides, please?
The significance and essential purpose underlying these words is to reveal and demonstrate unto the pure in heart and the sanctified in spirit that they who are the luminaries of truth and the mirrors reflecting the light of divine unity, in whatever age and cycle they are sent down from their invisible habitations of ancient glory unto this world, to educate the souls of men, and endue with grace all created things, are invariably endowed with an all-compelling power, and invested with invincible sovereignty. For these hidden gems, these concealed and invisible treasures, in themselves manifest and vindicate the reality of these holy words. Verily God doeth whatsoever he willeth, and ordaineth whatsoever he pleaseth. To every discerning and illumined heart is evident that God, the unknowable essence, the divine being, is immensely exalted beyond every human attribute, such as corporeal existence, ascent and descent, egress and regress. Far be it from his glory that human tongue should adequately recount his praise, or that human heart comprehend his fathomless mystery. He is and hath ever been veiled in the ancient eternity of his essence, and will remain in his reality everlastingly hidden from the sight of men. No vision taketh in him, but he taketh in all vision. He is the subtle, the all-perceiving.
All right, so what is Baha'u'llah saying in these two slides? Anyone want to sort of paraphrase?
It looks like Baha'u'llah is talking about the significance and the importance of the manifestation of God. And he uses the word, he says they're invariably endowed with all compelling power and invested with invincible sovereignty. It reminds me of the analogy of the twig we were using before,
Mm-hmm.
that the manifestation of God is both in this world and in the next world.
Right.
And I think we were talking about how the manifestation of God has innate knowledge. And I think, was it this last week? I think we talked about how Jesus was illiterate.
Right.
He
Well, he
was
probably could read and write a little bit, but
right.
Muhammad was definitely illiterate.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no question about Muhammad being illiterate. So the Quran was dictated and other people wrote down what Muhammad said. Jesus wrote something in some sand. We don't know what he wrote. He also, on one occasion, read aloud in read the Torah in the synagogue, so he knew a little bit about reading and writing. But he probably had a very limited, rudimentary education because he was a tradesman. He was he worked in wood and probably worked in stone.
This reminds me of a part in book 2. In Ruhi book 2, I think in the second unit, when it's talking about having uplifting conversations. This is one of the topics is the manifestation of God. And it gives an analogy in book 2. It's an analogy of the mirror.
Right.
And here it's talking about they use the mirror, I believe, the analogy too.
Right. Baha'u'llah refers to them as mirrors. Excuse me.
Yeah,
The
luminaries.
luminaries of truth, and the mirrors reflecting the light of divine unity. So they're not the light itself, but they're the ones who reflect the light of God.
Yeah.
And so they have all compelling power and invincible sovereignty. They just don't show us that most of the time. And he uses the word hidden gems, invisible treasures, to describe them. And God does whatever he wants and ordains whatever he pleases. And then Baha'u'llah, as you know, it goes on to say, God, the unknowable essence, the divine being, is immensely exalted beyond every human attribute, such as corporal existence, ascent and descent, egress and regress. Why is that sentence important? Who could that sentence be addressing? Have you ever heard Christians talk about God became man and dwelt among us, and talking about Jesus, that Jesus is God, and that means that God existed in the human being of Jesus?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Baha'u'llah is explaining that God doesn't do that. He is the unknowable essence, the divine being. He's exalted beyond any human attribute. So he can't, he would not ascend into a one limited human being. That movie, there have been movies where Morgan Freeman or George Burns played God becoming a human. God wouldn't do that. He's too exalted to do that. And because he is beyond the ability for a human tongue to recount his praise or to comprehend his mystery, and this is why he's veiled in the ancient eternity of his essence. And he's going to stay that way. He's always going to be hidden from us. Yet he's the one that takes in all vision. We don't do it. He is the subtle, but also the all-perceiving. He sees everything, but we don't. We can't see him. Let's see. Imam, can you also read the next two, please?
Yes. No tie of direct intercourse can possibly bind him to his creatures. He standeth exalted beyond and above all separation and union, and all proximity and remoteness. No sign can indicate his presence or his absence. Inasmuch as by a word of his command all that are in heaven and on earth have come to exist, and by his wish, which is a primal wish itself, all have stepped out of utter nothingness into the realm of being, the world of the invisible. Gracious God, how could there be conceived any existing relationship or possible connection between his word and they that are created of it? The verse God would have beware of himself unmistakably beareth witness to that reality of our argument. And the words God was alone, there was none else beside him, are sure testimony of its truth. All the prophets of God and their chosen ones, all the divines, the sages, and the wise of every generation unanimously recognize their inability to attain unto the comprehension of the quintessence of all truth, and confess their incapacity to grasp him, who is the inmost reality of all things.
Any thoughts? No tie of direct intercourse can possibly bind him to his creatures. So when we are praying directly to God?
No, you pray to Baha'u'llah.
Right. Right. So it's actually when we're saying prayers, we're in essence really going through the messengers of God to get to God. They're as close as we can get. No sign can indicate his presence or his absence. By a word of his command, all that are in heaven and on earth have come to exist. By his which is the primal will itself, all have stepped out of utter nothingness into the realm of being.
That one was interesting. The previous one said no sign can indicate his presence or his absence.
Yeah. I mean, he's actually present all the time. So it's how can you show he's not there? So if you can't show he's not there, how can you show he's there if he's always there, right?
Right.
Yeah. And that's sort of an interesting mental exercise to think about that.
Mm.
This is sort of the basic argument for the existence of God. How could there be conceived any existing relationship or possible connection between his word and they that are created of it? You have a creation, you must therefore have a creator. And the creator must have had a will in order to bring about creation. God would have you beware of himself. It's an interesting quote from the Quran. That's Quran 6:103. God was alone, there was none else beside him. And if you go to any of the holy books, you will see that they all say the same thing, that you can't know God. All right. So, Sarush, can you get the next couple, please?
The door of the knowledge of the Ancient of Days being thus closed in the face of all beings, the source of infinite grace, according to his saying, his grace hath transcended all things, my grace hath encompassed them all, hath caused those luminous gems of holiness to appear out of the realm of the Spirit in the noble form of the human temple, and be manifest unto all men, that they may impart unto the world the mysteries of the unchangeable being, and tell of the subtleties of his imperishable essence. These sanctified mirrors, these daysprings of ancient glory, are one and all the exponents on earth of him who is the central orb of the universe, its essence and ultimate purpose. From him proceed their knowledge and power, from him is derived their sovereignty. The beauty of their countenance is but a reflection of his image, and their revelation a sign of his deathless glory. They are the treasuries of divine knowledge, and the repositories of celestial wisdom. Through them is transmitted a grace that is infinite, and by them is revealed the light that can never fade, even as whatsoever between thee and them, except that they are thy.
I think Suresh got out.
Sarush, did you get frozen? I
Yeah.
think you're frozen, Sarush. Or you're playing a game of statues, one or the other. Sarush, we lost you. So even as he has said, there is no distinction whatsoever between thee and them, except that they are thy servants and are created of thee. This is the significance of the tradition. I am he himself, and he is I myself. This is, again, something you have to get your head around. Martine, welcome back. So this is all fairly straightforward. That we don't know God, and so he created these human beings to tell us about him. Sarush, we lost you there for a moment.
Very sorry. Did I get to read the whole thing?
I read the last sentence aloud for those who couldn't understand your frozen visage going. Yeah, so even as he has said, there is no distinction whatsoever between thee and them, except that they are thy servants and are created of thee. This is the significance of the tradition. I am he himself, and he is I myself. So any thoughts on these two, on this section here with these two slides? This is what I think we've talked about many times. But every time Baha'u'llah says these things or puts it into different words, you get new meanings of it. All right. Atin, are you in a position to read?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, can you read the next two slides, please?
Sure. Whatever is in the heavens and whatever is on the earth is a direct evidence of the revelation within it of the attributes and names of God, inasmuch as within every atom are enshrined the signs that bear eloquent testimony to the revelation of that most great light. Methinks, but for the potency of that revelation, no being could ever exist. How resplendent the luminaries of knowledge that shine in an atom, and how vast the ocean of wisdom that surge within a drop. To a supreme degree is this true of man, who, among all created things, hath been invested with the robe of such gifts, and hath been singled out for the glory of such distinction. For in him are potentially revealed all the attributes and names of God to a degree that no other created being hath excelled or surpassed. All these names and attributes are applicable to him, even as he hath said, man is my mystery, and I am his mystery. All things in their inmost reality testify to the revelation of the names and attributes of God within them, each according to its capacity, indicateth and is expressive of the knowledge of God. So potent and universal is this revelation, that it hath encompassed all things, visible and invisible. Thus hath he revealed. Hath aught else save thee a power of revelation, which is not possessed by thee, that it could be manifested thee? Blind is the eye which doth not perceive thee. Likewise hath the eternal King spoken. No thing have I perceived, except that I perceived God within it, God before it, or God after it.
So this is very weighty language. Any thoughts?
I really liked what he said. For him, basically the blue highlighted parts, but for him are potentially revealed all the attributes and names of God to a degree that no other created being hath excelled or surpassed. And I really like that. He says, "Man is my mystery, and I am his mystery."
Yeah.
It's thought provoking, very very deep. Because I'm still trying to figure out what that exactly means. But also very, very revealing.
Yeah. So at least as far as the creation that we are able to perceive in this earthly plane, we are at the top of the pyramid. To a supreme degree is this true of man, who among all created things hath been invested with the robe of such gifts, and hath been singled out for the glory of such a distinction. So everything in the universe is a direct evidence of the revelation and the names and attributes of God. Even the atoms. Methinks but for the potency of that revelation, no being could ever exist. So we have the capacity to express the names and attributes of God. Let's see, Imam, can you do the next two slides, please?
Yes. Man, the noblest and most perfect of all created things, excelleth them all in the intensity of this revelation, and is a fuller expression of its glory. And of all men, the most accomplished, the most distinguished, and the most excellent are the manifestations of the Son of Truth. So he's comparing man to the rest, like the atoms, and
Right,
he's saying a man is a fuller expression of its glory, but even more, even on top of man is the manifestation of God.
right. So they're not normal people.
Mhm.
Can you read this next one?
Yeah. Nay, all else besides these manifestations live by the operation of their will, and move and have their being through the outpourings of their grace. But for thee I would have not created the heavens. Nay, all in their holy presence fade into utter nothingness, and are a thing forgotten. Human tongues can never befittingly sing their praise, and human speech can never unfold their mystery. These tabernacles of holiness, these primal mirrors, which reflect the light of unfading glory, are but expressions of him who is invisible of the invisibles. By the revelation of these gems of divine virtue, all the names and attributes of God, such as knowledge and power, sovereignty and dominion, mercy and wisdom, glory, bounty, and grace, are made manifest.
Thoughts?
But for thee, I would have not created the heavens.
Right.
What does that mean in this context?
That for God,
Mhm.
the manifestation, his manifestations, this method by which he communicates with all his creatures through the manifestations of God. If he hadn't had this method for communications, he wouldn't have even bothered to create creation.
Oh, I see.
So
Oh,
he's
wow.
saying that
Yeah.
God basically why would he have a creation if he didn't have a means to communicate with it, right?
Right.
So he wouldn't have done anything. He wouldn't have created anything if he didn't have a method, and they are the method. And he says, all else besides these manifestations live by the operation of their will and move and have their being through the outpourings of their grace, because they are the ones they're the intermediaries that of the creator. So they make things happen in the world.
Mm.
All, not just the believers, all else besides these manifestations live by the operation of their will and move and have their being through the outpourings of their grace. I mean, that I can't get my head around that one.
And
Huh?
sorry.
Yeah, go
Sorry.
ahead.
And when we talk about these manifestations, is it Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Krishna?
And the thousands of ones that we don't know their names.
Zoroaster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Who have existed in other cultures and places. You know, there were ones that came to the Americas, but we don't know much about them.
Wow. Oh, like the Native American ones as well.
Right. Right. Yeah. Christopher Buck and the late Kevin Locke were doing research into that.
Hmm.
So, but we know prehistory, there have always been manifestations, because if he has creatures, he has to have a way of communicating, and this is his method of sending an intermediary.
It's so interesting that because this, I feel like if I told this to someone, a seeker, a lot of them really like the idea of progressive revelation, but a lot, if I guess depends on their background, they think their manifestation of God is the last one. I think we talked about this before, but
Right.
I have a I had a friend, I told him it was like an interfaith gathering, and we were each person they kind of told the other people about their religion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I said my religion came 200 years ago or so, and there's a new manifestation of God. His name is Baha'u'llah. And the Muslim person, he didn't directly respond to it, but later on he just added, but as Muslims, we believe that Muhammad is the last prophet, the sealed prophet. But then also like there's, Christians say the same thing, or they're waiting for Jesus himself to return, right? And then Jews have a similar, so I have a similar concept. So I was always thinking about what the best way of like responding in a tact way to something like that, because I've been asked that a lot. Why is it that Muhammad has said he's a seal of the prophets, but Baha'u'llah is the manifestation of God for today?
Well, do any of the rest of you have any ideas on how to respond to people who are caught up on the Muhammad being the seal of the prophets? What can we say to someone who has that reaction to Baha'u'llah?
There's like, oh, go ahead, Metin.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, sure. So there's a couple YouTube videos on this, maybe more, but one answer is that he is the seal of the prophets. This is basically confirmed by Baha'u'llah, and I mean, he is. It's what it says in the holy books. He's the seal of the prophets. But one understanding that I have is that maybe he's the seal of the prophets and there's no more prophets, but there's still manifestations of God. So, the Bab and Baha'u'llah are manifestations of God. Um, and I know in Arabic there's two words. There's the seal of the prophets is Khatamun Nabiyin or something like that, and Nabi is prophets, but Rasul, I think, is the word that they use for manifestation of God. I might be mistaken, but there's two different distinctions. And I think, Baha'u'llah has affirmed that he is the seal of the prophets. He's called him that. Muhammad is the seal of the prophets. But the meaning of that, in one sense, he's we understand that he's the ending of the prophetic cycle, the Adamic cycle. I don't fully
Mhm.
know if these are the same exact thing, but he's the end of this cycle of prophecy, and now is a brand new cycle. And in the Quran, there's a couple of different, lines that talk about progressive revelation, and they talk about um, the fact that each group of people has their own, prophets that have been sent to them. And in the Quran, I think the understanding is that there have been like 144,000 prophets throughout history. Maybe this is, like maybe it's a figurative number, but at least, there's been lots of prophets. This is the common Muslim understanding. So this is everything I know. I think, he is the seal of the prophets, but this line has been kind of misconstrued. So
Hmm.
that's all I know.
Yeah, thank you, Surush. Actually, what Surush said also reminded me. Someone had told me, like what Suresh was saying, Muhammad is the seal of the prophets because he's the last person to prophesize the coming of Baha'u'llah.
He's the last one to prophesize the coming of the age of fulfillment, where the kingdom of God will be on earth, which is essentially mankind's maturity. And so in many ways, this is why the Bab is called the gate, because he opens up the next big cycle. But Muslims are also looking for the Gayam, and they're looking for the return of Jesus. So why are they looking for them if there's nobody coming after Muhammad? So that's a contradiction they can't really address, because they are looking for the return of Jesus and they are looking for the Gayam.
Nice.
So yeah, so you have to say, well, what about the Gayam?
But is that for just Shia?
Well, that's the Shia, but the Sunni are looking also for the return of Christ.
And we know when we say Baha'u'llah and the Bab are manifestations of God, they also prophesized. So could we also say that they are prophets?
Well, they're I guess the use of prophecy, as I would be understanding it in this context, is yes, they know the future. So the prophesizing the future and talking about the next manifestation coming, and the golden age of mankind and all these they are prophesizing in that sense. But the big prophecy was that at some point there will be a golden age. And Baha'u'llah came, and the Bab came to usher in the golden age, that it's no longer a time where we just talk about that coming in the future. They gave us the blueprint, the final blueprint to make it happen. Because as Shoghi Effendi explains in World Order, this is the final culmination of mankind's organization of society, is the Baha'i administrative order, which will ultimately become the organizational pattern for the entire planet. Mankind may continue to evolve in other ways, but it's the organization of the planet so that we can use our resources, we can get along harmoniously and have a world without war. That's the age that was prophesized, but is now coming into being. So the age of prophet, that kind of prophecy is over. Now it's just, how do we get it to be even better? Will be the job of the next manifestation, to take us to a different kind of evolution. So one of the things that I've heard people in other Baha'i talks over the years talk about, and I don't know where I would find it in the writings, but that this Adamic cycle is going to sort of fade from memory, the further we get into this cycle of fulfillment, because it is mankind's childhood, and we tend to forget our childhood. We don't even really remember the first years of our childhood.
Oh yeah, there was that. When we were doing the study of World Order, I think it was World Order Baha'u'llah, the last study we did together.
Yeah, or yeah.
And there was it said that Shoghi Effendi said that mosques would become a historical, you know.
Yeah.
Actually, Suresh saw this too. Near my school, there's a mosque, and it's a parking structure now.
Already.
Yeah.
Because mosques are still fairly new structures in the United States. It's already a parking garage, huh?
Yeah, a couple years ago they changed it, I guess, to it's called the Shrine, and it has like the Muslim symbol at the top of the shrine.
Right.
But now it's a parking structure, and students pay like a monthly fee to park there.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, we have a family that is becoming, the oldest daughter has declared, and the mom is close to declaring. They have a bunch of other kids, and the dad had been in the military and had been in Iraq. And his big hang up is Islam, because what he saw in Iraq turned him off to Islam. And we're just trying now to explain to him that Islam is in its winter. You know, it's has nothing to do with Muhammad. It has to do everything with Muhammad's revelation is coming to the end of its spiritual life, and certainly what the Guardian said in Promised Day has come about Islam and its future is quoting the Bab, and I mean quoting Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha. It's not very nice.
Right. Yeah, the faith is just getting more and more exposure. Actually, a couple days ago, sorry, I was talking too much.
That's fine.
There was there's like a kind of a rapper, I guess, that passed away, and his wife posted a picture of him, and the wife has like 10 million followers. And she posted a picture of him, and in the caption, she used the Baha'u'llah, a quote from Baha'u'llah about the bird in a cage.
Wow.
And that post got like 1.5 million likes, and like LeBron James has liked it, and I was like,
Oh,
it's pretty cool. Like she used that Baha'i quote for that post, and then so many celebrities.
I saw that. It was
Yeah.
very incredible, actually. Yeah. So many people liked it. It was passed on a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people were commenting Baha'i quotes in the comment section. Just people that weren't Baha'is were just taking.
Wow.
Wait, his wife is Baha'i?
No, she's not. She's not.
Oh, well, that
I
was
guess
crazy.
she must have Baha'i friends, but or maybe she just looked up quotes about life after death and she liked that one.
That's wonderful. All right, so let's see. Martin, can you read the next couple?
Sure. These attributes of God are not and have never been vouchsafed, especially onto certain prophets, and withheld from others. Nay, all the prophets of God, his well-favored, his holy, and chosen messengers are without exception the bearers of his names and the embodiments of his attributes. They only differ in the intensity of their revelation and the comparative potency of their light. Even as he hath revealed, some of the apostles we have cause to excel the others. It hath therefore become manifest and evident that within the tabernacles of these prophets and chosen ones of God, the light of his infinite names and exalted attributes hath been reflected, even though the light of some of these attributes may or may not be outwardly revealed from these luminous temples to the eyes of men. That a certain attribute of God hath not been outwardly manifested by these essences of detachment doth in no wise imply that they who are the day springs of God's attributes and the treasuries of his holy names did not actually possess it.
So what is he talking about here? One of the things that this particular quote doesn't address, but is in other places in the writings, is it talks about manifestations endowed with constancy, which are ones who bring a book. But then there are lots of other people who seem to be prophets, like Elijah and Elisha, David, Solomon, Rumi, as I understand it, has been listed as a minor prophet. So I don't know whether this means that even people like that have the same level of knowledge as a Moses, a Jesus, a Muhammad. And obviously, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad knew a lot of things they just weren't ready to tell us. I mean, Jesus even says that in the New Testament. He says, there are many things I could tell you, but you couldn't bear them now. You're not ready to know about world government because you don't even know about the Western Hemisphere. So Jesus says quite clearly that he knew things that we weren't ready for. So it's very easy to start comparing messengers of God and saying, I like Buddha better than I like Krishna. That's not for us to judge. They all actually know the same thing. But we do tend to want to say, oh, our prophet is the best. Okay, so let's see. Martine, could you go ahead and read this one too, please?
Ye, inasmuch as the peoples of the world have failed to seek from the luminous and crystal springs its divine knowledge, the inner meaning of God's holy words, they therefore have languished, stricken and sore athirst, in the veil of ideal fancy and waywardness. To this testifieth that which hath been witnessed in this wondrous and exalted dispensation. Myriads of holy verses have descended from the heaven of might and grace, yet no one hath turned thereunto nor ceased to cling to those words of men. Not one letter of which they that have spoken them comprehend. For this reason the people have doubted incontestable truths, such as these, and caused themselves to be deprived of the resvon of divine knowledge and the eternal meads of celestial wisdom.
Pretty accurate. Very accurate. Myriads of holy verses have descended from the heaven of might and grace, yet no one hath turned thereunto, nor ceased to cling to those words of men, not one letter of which they that have spoken them comprehend. That we have done it to ourselves by ignoring these messengers of God, who have given us thousands of verses. So we are languishing, stricken and thirsty in the valley of idle fancy and waywardness. Now Baha'u'llah is going to move into a different discussion and start talking more about the Gayam. And he's going to give us a discussion about sovereignty, which I think is one of the things that must have really been bothering the uncle of the Bab. If the Gayam is supposed to exercise sovereignty, why didn't the Bab exercise sovereignty? Why didn't he take on the powers of a king? Of course, this was the same problem that the Jews had with Jesus. They were expecting a king who was going to get rid of the Romans for them. And instead, they got a tradesman from a back village who just went around curing people and talking to peasants. Didn't look like a sovereign lord to the average person hanging out with Jesus in Palestine in the 1st century. So he's going to now explain what true sovereignty is. Shaheen, are you at a place where you can read now?
Actually, yes, I am. Thank you for asking. The moment you asked Mateen to read again, I was like, oh, I lost my chance.
No, I knew you were driving. So now if you can actually go through the next 3 slides, that would be great.
Oh, awesome. Sure. 1 second. I'll even turn on my video. I just changed clothes. Let me just get situated. Okay.
Shaheen's been out partying.
Not partying, just attending a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful Baha'i Nowruz presentation for both Baha'is and non-Baha'is alike. And I felt if it was as festive as a party, but I watched the dancing, formal dances and this and that, but I didn't, of course. Nobody else danced, so not that kind of party. All right, let's start.
I mean, looks like you had a sounds like you had a good time.
I did have a good time, and no, it was a very spiritually wonderful time, and I saw some people that I hadn't seen in almost a year, almost exactly a year. It would be a year in May.
Oh,
Some
wow.
Baha'is and new Baha'is and friends of Baha'is. Just this man put on an amazing program all by himself, and he financed it all by himself. Over 200 people showed up. He held it in Petaluma, but people as far as Sacramento and the Bay Area came, at least an hour away that they would be driving just to get there.
Mm.
Okay, let me start. Can you guys see me? I don't have my own thing on.
We see you.
Why is it that the sovereignty of the Qaim, affirmed in the text of recorded traditions and handed down by the shining stars of the Mohammedan dispensation, hath not in the least been made manifest? Nay, the contrary hath come to pass. Have not his disciples and companions been afflicted of men? Are they not still victims of the fierce opposition of their enemies? Are they not today leading the life of abased and impotent mortals? Yea, the sovereignty attributed to the Qaim and spoken of in the scriptures is a reality, the truth of which none can doubt. This sovereignty, however, is not the sovereignty which the minds of men have falsely imagined. The prophets of old, each and every one, whenever announcing to the people of their day of the advent of the coming revelation, have invariably and specifically referred to that sovereignty with which the promised manifestation must needs be invested. This is attested by the records of the scriptures of the past. This sovereignty hath not been solely and exclusively attributed to the Qaim. Nay, rather, the attribute of sovereignty and all other names and attributes of God have been and will ever be vouchsafed unto all the manifestations of God, before and after him, inasmuch as these manifestations, as it hath already been explained, are the embodiments of the attributes of God, the invisible, and the revealers of the divine mysteries.
Let's go one more.
By sovereignty is meant the all-encompassing, the all-pervading power which is inherently exercised by the Qaim, whether or not he appear to the world clothed in the majesty of earthly dominion. This is solely dependent upon the will and pleasure of the Qaim himself. You will readily recognize that the terms sovereignty, wealth, life, death, judgment, and resurrection, spoken of by the scriptures of old, are not what this generation hath conceived and vainly imagined. Nay, by sovereignty is meant that sovereignty which in every dispensation resideth within, and is exercised by the person of the manifestation, the day star of truth. That sovereignty is the spiritual ascendancy, which he exerciseth to the fullest degree over all that is in heaven and on earth, and which in due time revealeth itself to the world in direct proportion to its capacity and spiritual receptiveness, even as the sovereignty of Muhammad, the messenger of God, is today apparent and manifest amongst the people. Well,
I particularly thought this last slide had some very interesting comments in it.
I mean, he's really defining what is sovereignty. This is like really like a very thorough explanation. Like, Jesus is king, right? And what is, that means that's referring to his sovereignty. And, just like the sovereignty of, all these manifestations of God is the same kind of, they all have this sovereignty. And I think, if somebody asks, I know some people were expecting the Messiah to have literal, a literal, throne, maybe like a literal staff, literal sword, or literal, I don't know, all kinds of literal interpretations. And it seems like none of this refers to any type of physical, um, items. It's every aspect here refers to something, I guess, intangible, right? Or intelligible, as it says in some answered questions. So, I think this is great to, again, for people who the friends might know who are kind of taking a literal understanding of things, maybe with the second return of Christ, maybe like this would be a good resource, kind of these couple of slides here that Shaheen read.
I was intrigued by the second sentence. I started reading at the beginning. Sovereignty is meant the all-encompassing, all-pervading power which is inherently exercised by the Gayam, whether or not he appear to the world clothed in the majesty of earthly dominion. This is solely dependent upon the will and pleasure of the Gayam himself, which I find fascinating. That obviously the Gayam, the Bab, is exercising the will of God, but he has how much of this sovereignty he has and how he exercises it is dependent upon his will and pleasure.
May I interrupt?
Yeah.
That reminds me of a story that Bob said in the Dawnbreakers, where he says, if I want to, I can take these stones, or was it pebbles or something, right here, and turn them into the most precious of gems. He was mentioning that to his disciples,
Right.
or at least maybe one of them. And it's like you forget how much they are just living here in disguise. They're not like us at all. And it's on purpose. And in fact, since God doesn't do anything directly anyway, all like again, all creation is running through the operation of the will of the manifest, or is running through the operation of the manifestations themselves. That means the Bob is here amongst us in flesh, but at the same time, he's juggling all the laws of the universe, allowing a leaf to fall off a tree at the right moment or not. Everything is up to him and his good pleasure. And he's just like, yeah, this is just do this, because he's so exalted above like the pettiness of wanting a McMansion, or like a super yacht, or any kind of fame, glory, anything that Putin would want or anybody else would want, that it's just so beneath his station that he would rather just live the most simple life. And really, if it's not even, and outwardly it might look humble, but it's like, I created this earth as it is. I know everything it is. This is my planet. I don't feel homeless. Like Jesus didn't probably feel actually homeless walking that way. This is my entire planet Earth. I know it in and out. This is all my backyard. You guys are my guests here. If you're building your mansion, you're building it on my property.
Interesting way to explain that, Shaheen. I like that. But they are in disguise. You don't really see them. And every once in a while, like Baha'u'llah, a couple of times sort of let people have a glimpse of his true reality. And it was beyond their ability to see that. He would glow.
Baha'u'llah would do certain miracles that are just nobody can explain it.
Right.
Some of them he did for amusement, other ones that he did for all seriousness.
Right.
Yeah, it didn't matter either way for him.
Wasn't
it that story that one of the gardeners complained about the mulberry bush or tree? I think that was just like shit, making too many food. He just casually goes up to the tree. Yeah, he's like, such a such tree. Janabe so and so, isn't happy with the all the fruit that gets shed on this bench or whatever it is. And the tree just stops yielding fruit for the rest of its existence.
Right,
I think
right.
that tree is still present. It's like, and that's a fruitless tree now, isn't it? Doesn't that mean that it's fit for fire? So
Right.
that tree's like, if that's what the Lord wants, that's what the Lord wants.
There's the story in the New Testament of the Transfiguration, where Jesus is on Mount Tabor and with 3 of his disciples, and he's conversing with Moses and Elijah, and he turns white. I mean, he physically changes. And one time Baha'u'llah went to the Garden of Rizwan, and he sort of stood apart from the other people who were with him, and he did the same thing. He physically became white and just sort of stood there. And when he sort of went back to being normal, he turned to his companions and said he had been communing with the great beyond. So they gave, in those 2 cases, some of the people who were following them a glimpse that they are, as you said, they're here in disguise. We don't see their true essence. I mean, Juliet Thompson had that experience with Abdu'l-Baha, where the room changed and he changed while she was trying to paint his portrait.
Wasn't there a story? I mean, I heard the story in when I was on pilgrimage, and I really really liked it. It still gets me to this day. Like there were some men. I think Kathy knows this. There's some people following Baha'u'llah. Maybe I just know the paraphrasing part of it. They're following him on his horse, and then he goes back. Basically they follow him. They see that there's a bunch of people waiting for Baha'u'llah, like just there's walking around, circumambulating, I think, around the shrine. Am I getting it right, Kathy?
Well, no. What happened was Nabil and Deep Tahirzad, his father, and one other person, they saw Baha'u'llah leaving when he was leaving Akka when he was moving to the mansion at Baji. And they knew this was an important day, that Baha'u'llah was leaving Akka to move to the mansion at Baji. And he went in the early evening when he could sort of slip out of town. He was in a carriage. And so they watched from their balcony as he went past. And then they decided to follow him from a distance, because this was a momentous thing for him to move to the mansion at Baji. And when they got to Baji, they didn't go to the house. Instead, they decided to circumambulate the mansion. And as they were circumambulating, they noticed that there were thousands of other people circumambulating at the same time. A multitude was circumambulating. And the fields at that time were muddy. So they had some difficulty walking as they circumambulated the mansion. So the next day they went back to the mansion and they saw their own footprints, but they didn't see anyone else's footprints. And I think Abdu'l-Baha confirmed to them that they had seen the reality of the Supreme Concourse circumambulating Baji, because Baha'u'llah was there.
There's also the story of the shopkeeper. When he goes to visit Baha'u'llah, I think his intention was to hurt Baha'u'llah, but he was transformed and he goes and visits Baha'u'llah. Oh no, the eyes of the guards, when we made the eyes of the guards go blind, that's the story. He
Right.
goes and visits Baha'u'llah and he gets the tablets from Baha'u'llah and he's told to take them from Baghdad, or from Akka to Baghdad. And on his way he is stopped by like the police officers, and Adi Tarzad, in the story, he says he turns his heart to Baha'u'llah and asks for his help, and he throws the bag. And the police officers, check him and everything, and then he's worried about where did he throw this bag, which shop did it go to, and then he sees that there's a man in that shop telling him to come into the shop, and he goes into the shop, and Person hugs him and says Allah. It's the only
Right.
Baha'i that was left in Baghdad.
So many, as I keep telling people, if this wasn't from God, who could make it up? So these messengers of God, that sovereignty is a spiritual ascendancy which he exercises to the fullest degree over all that is in heaven on earth, and which in due time revealeth itself to the world in direct proportion to its capacity and spiritual receptiveness. And he uses then Muhammad's sovereignty as it was during Baha'u'llah's time and the whole Muslim world. Everyone recognized the sovereignty of Muhammad, but they didn't during Muhammad's lifetime. So, but it will be due, the degree to which Baha'u'llah's sovereignty will be recognized will be due to, in direct proportion to the world's capacity and spiritual receptiveness. All right, Mateen, can you read the next two, please?
Shouldst thou observe it with a discerning eye, thou wilt all the remaining days of thy life lament and bewail the injury of Muhammad, that wronged and oppressed the messenger of God. That verse was revealed at a time when Muhammad languished weary and sorrowful beneath the weight of the opposition of the people and of their unceasing torture. In the midst of his agony, the voice of Gabriel calling from the Sadrutul Mantua was heard saying, but if their opposition be grievous to thee, if thou canst seek out an opening into the earth or a ladder into heaven. The implication of this utterance is that his case had no remedy, that they would not withhold their hands from him unless he should hide himself beneath the depths of the earth or take his flight onto heaven. Consider how great is the change today. Behold, how many are the sovereigns who bow the knee before his name? How numerous the nations and kingdoms who have sought the shelter of his shadow, who bear allegiance to his faith, and pride themselves therein. From the pulpit top there ascended today the words of praise which in utter lowliness, glorify his blessed name, and from the heights of minarets there resounded the call that summoned the concourse of his people to adore him. Even those kings of the earth who have refused to embrace his faith and to put off the garment of unbelief, nonetheless confess and acknowledge the greatness and overpowering majesty of that day star of loving kindness. Such is his earthly sovereignty, the evidences of which thou dost on every side behold. This sovereignty must needs to be revealed and established either in the lifetime of every manifestation of God or after his ascension onto his true habitation in the realms above.
I think that's a very clear exploration of how their sovereignty ultimately does become manifest. Imam, can you get the next few?
Yes. When the light of the Quranic revelation was kindled within the chamber of Muhammad's holy heart, he passed upon the people the verdict of the last day, the verdict of resurrection, of judgment, of life, and of death. Thereupon the standards of revolt were hoisted, and the doors of derision opened. They refused to recognize the trumpet blast which so explicitly in this text was sounded through the revelation of Muhammad. They deprived themselves of the regenerating Spirit of God that breathed into it, and foolishly expect to hear the trumpet sound of the seraph of God, who is but one of his servants. Hath not the seraph, is that how it's pronounced? Seraph?
Yeah.
Seraph himself, the angel of the judgment day, is like been ordained by Muhammad's own utterance? By trumpet is meant the trumpet call of Muhammad's revelation, which was sounded in the heart of the universe, and by resurrection is meant his own rise to proclaim the cause of God. He bade the erring and wayward arise, and sped out of the sepulchres of their bodies, arrayed them with a beauteous robe of faith, and quickened them with the breath of a new and wondrous life.
So what was the trumpet blast for the Baha'i faith?
Is it
The Bab.
the Bab, yeah.
Well, what was the event that was the trumpet blast? Because the trumpet blast is like the angels announcing the next revelation has started. The new dispensation has started. What was the trumpet blast? Do you know what event has been called the trumpet blast?
I think there's maybe more than one, but one of them is Tahira removing her veil.
That's the main one. That's the one most people know of. That's considered the angels blasting their trumpets, telling mankind a new revelation has happened, has begun, a new dispensation. Because this new revelation of the Bab and of Baha'u'llah is changing the laws. It's changing everything from Muhammad. Everything from Muhammad is now under the control of the Bab and Baha'u'llah, and they have the authority to make changes. So, as it said, when Muhammad began his dispensation, he passed upon the people the verdict of the last day, the judgment of what was the state of society at that time. And he tells the truth he judges it and sets new standards for mankind. And this shook people up, and so they revolted against him and derided him. He bade the erring and wayward arise and speed out of the sepulchres of their bodies. Sepulchres is a way of saying tombs. Arrayed them with the beauteous robe of faith and quickened them. Quicken means to take a dead body and give it life. Quicken them with the breath of a new and wondrous life.
Wait, question.
Yes.
What was the other trumpet blast? Did we discuss it? The one was the Tahrir. What was the other one?
I don't know of another one. Cyrus, do you know of another trumpet
There should
blast?
be two, right?
Well, I don't know. I thought there might be one besides Tahira, but I can't say what the other one would be.
Well, because Baha'u'llah was also involved with that one at Badash, perhaps it's a trumpet blast for both of them. I don't know. What do you think, Shaheen?
I'm wondering if when the Bab went to Mecca, and there's a Mecca or Medina where that thing is, and he knocked on the thing, he said, "Verily, I am the promised one."
Yeah,
I think that he said it like 3 times to fulfill a prophecy.
That's
I
true.
wonder.
Kaaba, and then he sent a message to the Sharif of Mecca, which also was, yeah.
I was thinking the same thing as I was thinking maybe even his conversation with Mullah Hussein.
Oh, very good candidates.
Or there's the one where Qudus immediately recognizes the Bab as he passes by, and
Right. Well, Qudus is another interesting person because he seems to be almost a lesser prophet. He has a station. He was revealing the word of God at Badasht. So he is someone who we don't really fully understand who he is. He's got a station much higher than Mullah Hussein and the other letters of the living. And they treat him that way. Particularly Mullah Hussein comes to recognize that Kudus is somebody special, but we don't fully understand who he was.
All of the
So,
oh, sorry.
oh, continue.
All of the letters of the living were Persian, except one was Indian, right?
I don't know. I know that they also came from a variety of ethnic and geographic areas in Iran,
Hmm.
but I don't know about one being from India. Don't know much about most of them. All right, so let's see.
I wanted to just add here, in Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, it says, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised
Right.
incorruptible, and we shall be changed. So
Yes.
it seems like this originates from maybe from the Bible, and then but in Islam they also have this understanding of the trumpet, right?
And I think that's actually from the Old Testament, even though it's being quoted in Corinthians.
Okay, makes sense.
So I think it's a Jewish tradition as well, the trumpet blast. And the seraphs are another form of angel, but they're angels who have a particular role, and Baha'u'llah says they are the ones that announce the judgment day. But they had people at the temple in Jerusalem who sounded trumpets. So this was they were good with metallurgy. So they could do trumpets. So this is a very old religious image. So let's see if we can get a little bit further, and we may not get quite to the end of the sovereignty discussion tonight, but hopefully we'll get close to the end of it. So let's see, Sarush, can you get the next few slides, please?
Sure. Such things have come to pass in the days of every manifestation of God. Even as Jesus said, Ye must be born again. Again he saith, Except a man be born of water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of God. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. The purport of these words is that whatsoever in every dispensation is born of the Spirit and is quickened by the breath of the manifestation of holiness, he verily is of those that have attained unto life and resurrection, and have entered into the paradise of the love of God. And whosoever is not of them is condemned to death and deprivation, to the fire of unbelief, and to the wrath of God. In all the scriptures, the books and chronicles, the sentence of death, of fire, of blindness, of want of understanding and hearing, have been pronounced against those whose lips have tasted not the ethereal cup of true knowledge, and whose hearts have been deprived of the grace of the Holy Spirit in their day, even as it hath been previously recorded, hearts have they with which they understand not. I think that's from Jeremiah, right? They have ears, but they hear not. Anyways,
I
in
don't know.
every age and century, sorry, yeah, I don't know either. In every age and century, the purpose of the prophets of God and their chosen ones hath been no other but to affirm the spiritual significance of the terms life, resurrection, and judgment. But oh, how strange and pitiful! Behold, all the people are imprisoned within the tomb of self, and lie buried beneath the nethermost depths of worldly desire. Wert thou to attain to but a dewdrop of the crystal waters of divine knowledge, thou wouldst readily realize that true life is not the life of the flesh, but the life of the spirit. For the life of the flesh is common to both men and animals, whereas the life of the spirit is possessed only by the pure in heart, who have quaffed from the ocean of faith and partaken of the fruit of certitude. This life knoweth no death, and this existence is crowned by immortality. If by life be meant this earthly life, it is evident that death must needs overtake it.
Okay. Any thoughts?
So even when our souls are immortal, there's still a higher stage of life that it needs to ultimately attain. I think that when it doesn't, it's as if the soul is dead.
Right.
I think in the stages of the development of the soul, this one's called the assured soul. I think when the soul reaches the stage of when it's called the assured soul, it basically unloads its burden and it has certitude. And I think the evolution of the soul after that is just by the good pleasure of God.
Mm-hmm.
It's very
Okay,
mysterious.
let us do okay, I think actually let's go back to that previous one, and this is probably a good good place to stop since it's almost midnight here. I've been this particular section, I just took out what to me seemed the most important sections so we could not get too take too many months to get through this book. So I have omitted a number of paragraphs in this section that talk about specific instances within Islam and Christianity. So you may want to go back and read this on your own. But these concepts, life, resurrection, judgment, are obviously very important to understanding not just the Baha'i teachings, but Christianity and Islam. All right. So is this we're at the midnight hour here on the East Coast, and you've got school or work tomorrow. So I think this is a good point to stop.